Loss. It's a word that carries so much weight, so much pain. It's a universal experience, yet it feels so deeply personal when it happens to you. The word itself seems to echo in the empty chambers of your heart, reverberating with memories and moments that can never be relived. I never truly understood its impact until it took my beloved grandmother from me. She was the cornerstone of our family, the glue that held us all together. Her absence created a void that seemed impossible to fill. She was more than just family. She was my confidant, my friend. The one person who understood me without words. Her wisdom was a guiding light, her kindness a soothing balm to my soul. Every moment spent with her was a treasure, a memory etched in the fabric of my being. My earliest memories are filled with her laughter, her gentle touch, and the scent of her lavender perfume. That scent was like a signature, a comforting presence that lingered long after she had left the room. It was as if the very essence of her being was captured in that fragrance. Evenings were spent in her cozy kitchen, listening to her stories while the aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air. Those stories were more than just tales. They were lessons, woven with love and wisdom, imparted with a gentle voice that made everything seem possible. She had a way of making even the mundane seem magical. Whether it was a simple task like knitting or gardening, she infused it with a sense of wonder and joy. Her home was a sanctuary, a place where every corner held a piece of her heart. And then, she was gone. The light that she brought into our lives was extinguished, leaving behind a darkness that seemed impenetrable. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of the void her absence created. It was a cold, gray morning when we received the news. The world seemed to stop spinning as a wave of grief washed over me. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing the full weight of the loss to settle in. The world seemed to stop spinning as a wave of grief washed over me. The tears came unbidden, a torrent of sorrow that seemed to have no end. Each drop was a testament to the love I had for her, a love that would never fade. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of sorrow. The days that followed were a blur of tears and heartache. I wandered through life like a ghost, haunted by memories of her. The world seemed a little less bright, a little less kind without her in it. But as time passed, I began to find solace in those memories. They became a source of comfort, a reminder of the love and joy she brought into my life. Her legacy lived on in the stories she told, the lessons she imparted, and the love she gave so freely. In the end, loss is a part of life, a chapter in the story of our existence. It shapes us, molds us, and teaches us to cherish the moments we have. Though she is no longer with us, her spirit lives on in the hearts of those who loved her, and in that, she is never truly gone. My grandmother was the matriarch of our family, the glue that held us all together. Her home was always open, a haven where we gathered for holidays, birthdays, and Sunday dinners. She had a warmth about her, an aura of kindness that drew people in. We shared a special bond, my grandmother and I. I spent countless hours in her company, soaking up her wisdom and listening to her stories of a bygone era. She taught me the importance of family, of tradition, of cherishing the simple things in life. Her passing left a void in my life, a gaping hole that nothing could fill. The world seemed a little colder, a little less bright without her presence. It was as if a part of me had gone with her. The silence after she was gone was deafening. The house, once filled with her laughter and the tantalizing smells of her cooking, felt empty, hollow. It was difficult to believe that she was truly gone. Her funeral was a blur of tears and whispered condolences. I remember feeling numb, as if I were watching the events unfold from a distance. It was only when they lowered her coffin into the ground that the reality of her absence hit me with full force. The grief was overwhelming, a heavy weight that I carried with me everywhere I went. I longed for her comforting presence, her gentle voice, her unwavering love. But all that remained were memories and the faint scent of lavender that lingered in the air. The first sign that something was amiss came a few weeks after the funeral. It was a somber affair, filled with the muted whispers of grief and the heavy scent of lilies. The memory of that day lingered like a shadow, casting a pall over the house. It was a quiet night and I was alone in the house. The silence was almost tangible, wrapping around me like a thick, suffocating blanket. Every creak of the old house seemed amplified, echoing through the empty rooms. I was lying in bed, trying to ignore the emptiness that seemed to press in on me from all sides when I heard it, the distinct sound of footsteps slowly ascending the stairs. It was a sound that was both familiar and foreign, sending a chill down my spine. My heart pounded in my chest. Each beat felt like a drum, loud and insistent, drowning out the rational thoughts in my mind. I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew better. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, just like hers. Each step was measured, almost hesitant, as if the person was unsure of their destination. The sound was unmistakable, and it brought back a flood of memories. I held my breath, listening intently as the sound drew closer. The air in the room seemed to grow colder, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was as if the very atmosphere was charged with an unseen presence. Fear coiled in the pit of my stomach like a serpent. It was a primal fear, one that spoke to the deepest, most ancient parts of my brain. I wanted to run, to hide, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the unknown. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark contrast to the steady rhythm of the steps. I could almost feel the presence on the other side of the door, waiting, watching. I lay frozen in terror, afraid to even breathe. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was it a ghost, an intruder, or something far worse? The uncertainty was maddening. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, until finally, I worked up the courage to get out of bed and throw open the door. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. But there was no one there. The hallway was empty, devoid of any signs of life. The only thing that greeted me was the cold, unfeeling darkness. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Slowly I closed the door and sat back down on the edge of my bed. The fear had not entirely dissipated, but it was now mingled with a sense of confusion and unease. What had I heard? Was it real, or just a figment of my imagination? I glanced out the window, the moonlight casting long shadows across the room. The night was still and quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I knew that sleep would not come easily that night. Lying back down, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts and questions. The footsteps, the presence, the cold, it all felt too real to be a mere trick of the mind. I knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would change my life forever. Eventually, exhaustion took over and my eyes slowly closed. But even in sleep, the questions lingered, haunting my dreams with their unanswered mysteries. The footsteps in the silence were just the start of a journey into the unknown. The strange occurrences continued, each one more unsettling than the last. It started with small things, lights flickering, doors creaking open on their own, but soon the disturbances grew more pronounced, more impossible to ignore. Whispers in the dead of night became a common occurrence. At first we thought it was just the wind, or perhaps our imaginations playing tricks on us, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were trying to communicate something we couldn't quite understand. Objects moving on their own added to the growing sense of unease. A chair would rock back and forth with no one near it. Books would tumble off shelves as if pushed by an invisible hand. These events were no longer isolated incidents, they were becoming a part of our daily lives. The once warm and inviting house now felt cold and oppressive, as if an unseen presence had taken up residence within its walls. The air itself seemed heavier, filled with a sense of foreboding that was impossible to shake. It was as if the house was alive and it was angry. The weight of our shared grief, coupled with the unexplainable events, began to take a toll on my family. We were all struggling to cope with the loss, and the strange occurrences only added to our stress. It felt like we were living in a nightmare, one from which we couldn't wake up. We argued constantly, our once strong bonds fraying under the strain. Every little thing became a source of conflict, and the tension in the house was palpable. It was as if the house itself was feeding off our negative emotions, growing stronger as we grew weaker. It was as if the very foundation of our family was crumbling around us. The cracks in the walls seemed to mirror the cracks in our relationships, each one growing wider with every passing day. We were falling apart, and there seemed to be nothing we could do to stop it. We were desperate for answers, for any explanation that could make sense of the unsettling events that plagued our lives. We searched through old books, looking for clues, hoping to find something that would explain what was happening to us. We even held intense discussions, trying to piece together the puzzle, but nothing seemed to fit. Some suggested the house was haunted, that my grandmother's spirit was unable to find peace. The idea seemed far-fetched, but as the strange occurrences continued, it became harder to dismiss. We began to wonder if there was some truth to the old stories, if perhaps the house was indeed haunted by a restless spirit. Others dismissed it as grief-induced hallucinations, a way for our minds to cope with the loss we were struggling to process. They argued that our grief was manifesting in these strange occurrences, that our minds were playing tricks on us. But deep down we all knew that something was terribly wrong, and we were powerless to stop it. Driven by a desperate hope for closure, we decided to consult with a medium. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a calming presence. She listened patiently as we recounted the strange happenings, her expression grave. "Your grandmother is trapped," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "She's trying to communicate, to warn you." Following the medium's instructions, we gathered in the living room that night. We dimmed the lights, lit candles, and arranged ourselves in a circle on the floor. Holding hands, we closed our eyes and focused on my grandmother, summoning her spirit with every fiber of our